This is the life group study for week beginning Monday, the 10th of February 2025. And just a brief recap of the message. We had a Vision Sunday. We looked at our vision statement. We exist to love Jesus and love people by knowing him and making him known. God is growing us into a large all sorts family from across Leeds that impacts Woodhouse, the city and the world. Come and join the adventure. And we saw how we've got so much to be faith-filled about. We looked at the prophetic word that Ginny brought us several years ago about the latter glory of this house. The building that we're in will be greater than the former, says the Lord of hosts. That prophetic sense she had for us, that God was going to do amazing things over the years to come. And we looked at some of the amazing things that the church used to do, and we looked at the school it used to have and the community centre it used to have, and we looked at some of the kind of spiritual history of Woodhouse as well. This is a photo of Joseph Entwistle, who was a Methodist preacher in the early 19th century, and he talks here about seeing many people coming to Christ. Great numbers are flocking to Christ. Upwards of 100, it is said, have obtained an assurance of the remission of sins this last week. And so just to kind of whet our appetite for what God may do in our locality. And we looked at how much we have to look forward to this year in terms of continuing with our prayer triplets, our life groups, men's and women's events, our cafe, chill zone, food bank, fuel bank, our Tri-Church Sundays, our Devoted Festival, Youth Going to New Day, and lots of many exciting other things happening. But we also looked at the whole sense that actually our culture is more important than our strategy. I love the Pete Drucker statement that says culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so we thought about actually, rather than focusing on our strategy for this year, what culture do we want to see in our church? And I shared how we were helpfully served by Phil Smith among us, who said that he felt God speaking to us that this is a year for us as a church community to receive a kind of fresh emphasis upon family, upon rest, and upon reconciliation. And we looked at how this is a year for us to have a culture of family. It's right within our vision statement to be an all sorts family. And we looked at the importance of protecting and guarding those family relationships that we have. We also said that actually that's kind of the flavor too of the culture we want among the whole church. We want the church to be a family. We look to Jesus' teaching saying, "Who is my family? Here are my brothers and sisters, those who do the will of God." Then we looked at how we want this to be a year of rest for us as a church family. And we looked at what does it mean to carve out healthy rhythms of rest in our culture today. And we looked at Jesus' statement where in Mark 6 verse 31 it says this, "Then because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, 'Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest.'" And so, well as being active and doing lots of amazing things with God, let's also make sure we're carving out good patterns of rest. And then thirdly and finally, a year for reconciliation. And we looked at the parable of the unmerciful servant, where this king kind of forgives one of his servants of 10,000 talents, but then the servant goes on to demand payment immediately from a fellow servant who owed him just 100 denarii. And we looked at, because we've been forgiven much, we should forgive much too. We looked at the idea of reconciliation needing both parties to come together and to admit fault, where forgiveness only needs one party. But helpful, I think, for us to pray that if there are relationships that need reconciliation, that God would do that among us as a church community this year. So hopefully that was a helpful recap. And we of course saw that how these three elements are not just peoplewood, but Godwood. How God has brought us into his family, how God has given us the rest from our works for our salvation. He's given us an eternal rest for our souls. and also how God ultimately has reconciled us to himself through Jesus Christ. And because we experience these vertical truths, we can express them horizontally in our relationships. So here are 3 brief questions for you to get chewing over this content. What does it mean to be part of a church family? What does that mean in practice? How can we model rest in our culture? And what have your experiences of reconciliation been? Enjoy chatting.